He was a forgotten man in a forgotten place, guarding a legacy no one wanted anymore. With the world telling him to sell, to give up, only one soul remembered the promise he had made: his old, tired dog. This is the story of a farmer who had to choose between a fortune in his pocket and the last heartbeat of his family's soul. In the vast, windswept plains of Montana, time isn't measured in minutes, but in seasons. For 74 years, Silas Blackwood had measured his life this way. His hands, gnarled and tough as old leather, were a road map of every fence mended, every lamb delivered, every harvest brought in. This land wasn't just property, it was a living member of the Blackwood family, passed down through 4 generations. But now, Silas was the last. His wife, Eleanor, rested on the hill overlooking the valley, and his children, drawn by the siren song of the city, saw the farm not as a home, but as an asset. His only constant, his silent partner, was Bandit, a Border Collie whose legs had grown slow, but whose eyes still held the sharp, calculating fire of his ancestors. Together, they were the last 2 guardians of a dying kingdom. The serpent arrived not with a hiss, but in a polished black sedan that looked alien against the dusty farm road. A man in a suit, smelling of city air and ambition, laid out the offer on Silas's worn kitchen table. The numbers were staggering, enough to erase his debts, to live out his final years in comfort, to give his children the inheritance they craved. The offer was a logical, sensible end to a lifetime of struggle. "It's a new world, Mr. Blackwood," the man said, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Farming like this, it's a thing of the past." Every word was a perfectly aimed blow, dismantling Silas's life's work, labeling it as obsolete. When the man left, the contract sat on the table, a paper tombstone for a life not yet over. The pressure mounted, a slow, crushing weight. The phone calls from his son became a weekly ritual of polite, frustrated love. "Dad, it's not a failure. It's a smart business decision. Think of your health. Think of us." Each word was a logical bullet point, chipping away at the foundation of Silas's identity. He would walk the fields, the unsigned contract feeling like a lead weight in his pocket, the wind whispering Eleanor's name, making him question everything. Was he just a stubborn old fool? A ghost haunting his own memories, clinging to a legacy his own bloodline saw as a burden? He was losing the argument with himself. The logic was undeniable. The exhaustion was real. He was ready to surrender. But then he would see Bandit. The old dog, stiff with arthritis that mirrored Silas's own aching joints, would still perform his sacred duties. He'd limp out to the pasture, his gaze sweeping the small flock with the intensity of a general reviewing his troops. He wasn't just watching sheep. He was maintaining order in a world descending into chaos. He was the living memory of every promise Silas had ever made, to his father, to Eleanor, to the land itself. One evening, watching Bandit nudge a stray lamb back towards its mother, Silas felt a profound, gut-wrenching shame. The dog, with his failing body and unwavering spirit, was still doing his job. He was upholding a duty that had been bred into his very bones for 1,000 years. And what was Silas doing? He was contemplating a surrender. In Bandit's tired, loyal eyes, Silas saw not just a reflection of his own heart, but a judgment, a silent, powerful question that echoed louder than his son's phone calls. Since when do we abandon our post? The blizzard came without mercy, a furious white curtain that erased the world. It was the kind of storm that old-timers told stories about, a storm that tested the very will to survive. In the chaos of getting the animals to shelter, Silas made a devastating discovery. A pregnant ewe, the prize of his dwindling flock, was missing. He searched until the snow was up to his knees, his aging body screaming in protest, the wind stealing his breath. He was forced back to the house, defeated, the image of the lost you a symbol of his own failure. He sank into his chair by the cold fireplace, the serpent's contract on the table seeming to mock him. It was over. The land had finally won. As Silas sat in the encroaching darkness, the house groaning under the assault of the blizzard, a wet nose nudged his calloused, unmoving hand. It was Bandit. The old dog looked at him, a low whine vibrating in his chest. He then looked at the door, a silhouette against the raging white, and let out a single, sharp, commanding bark. It was not a bark of panic or fear. It was a report. It was the sound of a soldier telling his commander that a man had been left behind. "There's no use, old friend," Silas whispered, his voice a hoarse rattle of defeat. "It's over. She's gone. We're done." He was speaking to the dog, but he was sentencing himself. But Bandit refused the verdict. He stepped back, lowered his head, and barked again, a sound of pure, undiluted insubordination. It was a sound that said, "You may have given up, but I have not. Our work is not finished." The sheer, defiant will in that bark pierced through the thick fog of Silas's despair. He looked from the mocking contract on the table to the unwavering eyes of his dog. For 74 years he had faced droughts, floods, and financial ruin. He had never surrendered. Who was he in his final season to be taught a lesson in courage by a creature with a fraction of his years, but a spirit 1,000 times stronger? A fire, long thought extinguished, ignited in his chest. With a surge of adrenaline that defied his age, he grabbed his heavy coat and the old storm lantern. "All right, you stubborn old fool," he grunted, a ghost of a smile on his face. "One last run." Following the determined, limping form of his partner into the white hell of the storm, Silas wasn't just looking for a lost sheep. He was trying to find himself. The wind was a physical wall, the snow a blinding fury. Silas could barely see his own feet, relying solely on the dark shape of Bandit moving ahead. The dog didn't search randomly. He moved with a certainty that defied the storm, his nose to the ground, his instincts a compass that modern technology could never replicate. After what felt like an eternity, Bandit stopped beside a snow-covered thicket and began to bark, a sound of discovery. There, sheltered from the worst of the wind, was the ewe. She was in labor. Guided by the dog's presence and his own decades of experience, Silas worked in the freezing dark, delivering 2 healthy lambs. As he held the small, new lives in his hands, the blizzard raging around him, the truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. The truth hit him with the force of a physical blow, clearing his mind like the crisp, clean air after a storm. He didn't just see 2 lambs, he saw the future. He saw that this land wasn't a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. It was a crucible, a place meant to test, to protect, and to create life. The man in the suit saw acres and dollar signs. Bandit, in his primal wisdom, saw a flock that needed a shepherd. The choice, which had seemed so complex and agonizing for months, was now devastatingly, beautifully simple. The next morning, the world was reborn, blanketed in a pristine, silent white. The storm had passed. Silas Blackwood walked into his kitchen, the exhaustion in his bones overshadowed by a clarity he hadn't felt in years. He picked up the contract, the serpent's offer, and looked at it one last time. It was the logical choice, the sensible choice, the choice of a world he no longer belonged to. With a slow, deliberate motion, he tore it in 2, then in 4, and let the pieces fall into the trash like shedding a skin. He then picked up the phone. His hand didn't tremble. His voice, when he spoke, was not the reedy, tired voice of an old man, but the steady, resonant voice of a patriarch reclaiming his throne. He didn't call his son. He called a young, bright-eyed veterinarian in the nearby town who had once told him his farm had good bones. "Dr. Evans," he said, looking out the window at Bandit, who was already standing guard by the new lambs. "Silas Blackwood here. I've made a decision about the farm. I'm not selling, I'm expanding, and I'm going to need some help." The Blackwood farm was not sold, it was reborn. It became the Blackwood Sanctuary, a haven for old and abandoned farm animals. The story of the old farmer and his loyal dog who braved the blizzard spread through the county, inspiring volunteers and donations. Silas was no longer a lonely man guarding a graveyard. He was the proud curator of a living legacy, his days filled with purpose. Bandit, his partner, spent his final year not as a relic of the past, but as the respected patriarch of a new, diverse flock, watching over donkeys, goats, and sheep from his favorite spot on the porch. He had completed his last run, ensuring that the heart of the herd and the heart of his human would beat on for generations to come. There is a value that cannot be measured in dollars or acres. It is the value of a promise kept, of a life's work honored, of a duty fulfilled even when the world calls it obsolete. The story of Silas and Bandit reminds us that sometimes the most profound wisdom doesn't come from a spreadsheet, but from the unwavering eyes of a loyal friend who remembers who we are meant to be. It teaches us that our true legacy is not what we sell, but the life we nurture in the soil of our own soul. This is the silent chord. We believe the oldest souls often have the most to teach us. If this story took root in your heart, subscribe and join a community that listens.